Like NASCAR for cars, Wimbledon for tennis, and FIFA for soccer, the America's Cup is the quintessential competition in yacht racing. The field of sailboat racing is vast and includes such hallowed names as the Vendée Globe, Fastnet, we remember that one, and the Sydney to Hobart, to name a few. But America's Cup is one of the oldest yachting traditions with volumes of rules, ridiculous amounts of money invested, and more drama than a Shakespeare tragedy. Picture, if you will, a crowd of upper crust folks in their blue blazers and straw hats puffing cigars while looking across the water at Newport, Rhode Island. Spectators line the shore, standing in all kinds of weather for hours. Motorboats, trawlers, and sailboats crowd around the racecourse. Everyone from fish throwers to Wall Street brokers is here, with the bloodthirsty passion and patriotism only sporting events seem to bring out. Beyond an invisible line in the water, two yachts stand apart. Their profiles are sleek and low to the waterline. The crews look restless and tense as they hover their vessels near the start line. The skipper is watching the waves and the clouds. He's sniffing the air, using all senses to gain any advantage to make his yacht go faster. A shot rings out, and the two yachts are off. A race around a course, and whoever crosses the finish line first is the victor. It seems simple, but the America's Cup race is anything but simple. An intentional competition started by a British yacht club. The America's Cup race is an oxymoron with a complex history involving technology, lawsuits, and pride. If the name Dennis Conner sounds familiar, well, you'll get to hear a lot about him. In fact, the America's Cup is such a story that I'm going to split this into a two-parter. On today's Historsea episode, we're going to step back in time to the 1800s. We're going to learn how this yachting competition began, how it got its name, and why it was defended by one country so successfully for so long until it was lost. Let's go back to the early and mid-1800s. This was the Victorian era, and for the wealthy class, your options included travel, amassing land and titles, and joining sporting clubs. Of course, hunting was always popular, but just like today, the siren song called fools to the sea. Just off the southern coast of England is the Isle of Wight, a small island known for its traditions of boat building and sailing. A group of gentlemen there formed the Royal Yacht Squadron with the intention of sharing their love of yachts. They discussed yacht design and yacht materials and techniques for faster sailing. They probably smoked pipes and cursed their wool outerwear. Eventually, the squadron's interest in sailing parlayed into racing. These races gained interest from the Victorian wealthy class who flocked to the island with heavy purses and the kind of boredom that comes from counting your parcels of land all day and learning how to pronounce city names like Marylebone and Leicester. Placing wagers on yachts and waving hankies from the shore became quite fashionable for a while, but like most fashions, it eventually went out of style. The air around the Isle of Wight is cold and damp, after all, but the Royal Yacht Squadron continued. But then around 1850, a few things happened. Prince Albert, husband of Queen Victoria, began the tradition of what's now called the World's Fair. This event, known at the time as the Great Expedition, sought to gather the movers and shakers in technology, science, and culture, and art from all over the world to gather in Hyde Park in London. Along with the exhibits of giant diamond, an early fax machine, and a telescope, a yacht race was conceived in conjunction with the Great Expedition. The intention behind the race was to establish a new international yachting competition, the first in a series where nations could face off and show their innovations with yacht design and hard-earned skill as sailors in getting the most out of the wind. The race would circle the Isle of Wight just down the road and boat ride away from the happenings in London. An invitation to the race was issued to the international yachting community with a sterling silver cup offered as a trophy to the winning skipper. This is a great time to hit the like button on this video if you don't mind, and leave a comment. Tell me what you like about history, what you don't like about history, and if nothing else, just say hi. Us YouTubers get lonely. The trophy cup, valued at the time of the race at £100 sterling, was called the £100 cup, and later, mistakenly, the 100 guinea cup, due to a typo. The lucky winner would get to keep this cup, take it home, keep it nice and polished, and pass it down to the grandkids. But back to the race. Of particular interest to our guys over at the Royal Yacht Squadron was the participation of the Americas in the 100-something cup race. Because over on the east coast of the United States, another group of wealthy gentlemen had recently formed the New York Yacht Club, and they had RSVP'd hell yes to this race invitation over in England. Things started to get pretty spicy. Historsea is brought to you by patrons, people who give a couple of bucks an episode to make these videos possible. A big shout out to everybody who does that, and if you want to help out, please consider becoming a patron. Remember how things were back in 1851? Neither do I, so let's review it together. The War of Independence was less than 70 years earlier, and the Monroe Doctrine was still a fresh reminder that the U.S. wasn't going to be okay with the Brits trying to colonize nearby territories, which the Brits ignored. The two nations were in a fragile and guarded sort of relationship. Old wounds hadn't quite healed yet, but this race might help forge a new relationship, the old guard and the new kid on the block. Maybe they could even become friends. The Americans got busy. They were bold and brash and wanted in on this race. John Cox Stevens, the charter member of New York Yacht Club, had a 101-foot schooner built, and he christened her America. Captain William H. Brown sailed her over the Atlantic, preparing his crew along the way and training them for the big race. When the yacht America at last came to the shores of the Isle of Wight, the London newspaper, The Times, described the reaction to the yacht as the appearance of a sparrowhawk on the horizon creates among a flock of wood pigeons or skylarks. Meanwhile, the Royal Yacht Squadron had kept themselves busy gathering 8 different cutters and 7 schooners to race against the America, not stacking the odds or anything, the Brits. On August 22, 1851, the race began. With the boom of a cannon, all 16 yachts left the starting line, the shore of the Isle of Wight, racing clockwise around the island from the northern town of Cowes. From the start, the yacht America had problems with her anchor and was left behind. Not an auspicious beginning. She quickly made up time, though, and nudged into 5th place. Within 30 minutes, she was fast. Although not explicitly called out in the rules of this race, there was an unspoken rule among the members of the Royal Yacht Squadron to bear east of the Nab Tower buoy on the eastern coast of the island, around it before taking a southerly tack. America's pilot, however, made the decision to take the shorter route, tacking inshore between the buoy and the island. The official race rules made no specific mention of the Nab Tower buoy at all. This decision gave America the edge she needed, and she moved into first place just over 10.5 hours after starting. America crossed the finish line in first place. Watching this race from her royal yacht, Queen Victoria famously asked who came in second, to which she received the reply, "Your Majesty, there is no second." Over 20 minutes later, the remaining yachts began to trickle in. At the time of the race, tradition held that the winner won the trophy cup permanently, and the hefty cup was handed over to America's team. John Cox Stevens, owner of the America, brought the 100 guinea cup home and deeded it to the New York Yacht Club, renaming it the America's Cup after the first winner of the race. The club decided to make the cup available for perpetual international competition in the sport of yachting, and this is how the America's Cup was actually born. That silver cup sat at the New York Yacht Club for almost 20 years, unchallenged. An American Civil War interrupted everything, and the cup gathered dust waiting. In 1870, the New York Yacht Club was finally challenged again by the Brits. The Brits lost that race, but remained undeterred and continued to challenge and race 25 more times, losing every time. A pattern of 4 years between challenges was established, considered the right amount of time for all parties to raise funds and design and build a new yacht for the next race. 4 years. Over the next 100 years, the race rules would see massive changes. Technology and engineering made leaps and bounds in efficiency through the water and air and speed, and each innovation had ripple effects across the yacht racing world everywhere. There have been 9 official America's Cup rule changes since the 1850s, many of those changes encompassing several changes rolled into one single rule. For example, the number of Cup defending yachts in the race was limited to 1. Handicaps were introduced across the boats. New requirements for waterline length were established. Look, entire books have been written and devoted to these rule changes, and if that nitty-gritty detail thing is your thing, check out your local library for fascinating in-depth history of the America's Cup rules. Wars and economic catastrophes interrupted the once every 4 years pattern of the America's Cup race, but time and again the zeal to unseat the Cup from its New York location ignited yacht clubs from Australia, England, and Canada, among others. Challengers against the Defender were mounted, and the America's Cup stubbornly continued to call New York Yacht Club home. After World War II, everyone's coffers were empty. Everybody's broke. The giant yachts of the past were costly, and after almost 20 years without a challenge, the folks behind the America's Cup knew that a big change was needed to reignite the race, to reignite sailboat racing. The rules were amended to allow for smaller 12-meter classed yachts. The America's Cup race once again bounced back onto the scene, and this time stayed popular and kept up with her regular 4-year pattern. The 12-meter change meant smaller, more affordable boats, keeping in mind that affordable is kind of in the eye of the beholder. Regardless, the smaller yacht size was a welcome change that spawned a new generation of participants. By 1970, everybody wanted in on the action, and with an unprecedented number of challengers, the rules were changed once again. A selection series of races was created to determine a single official challenger for the Cup. This selection series would go on to be known as the Louis Vuitton Cup until 2017 and is now known as the Prada Cup. Some pretty wealthy sponsors. Yes, membership has its privileges, and enough money can get your brand name splashed across pretty much any sporting event, even if you're only known for making purses. The winner of the selection series would become the official challenger for the America's Cup. So here we find ourselves in 1983. The America's Cup had lived in New York Yacht Club for 132 years. Newport, Rhode Island had become synonymous with the race and was summer home to families like the Vanderbilts, Astors, Kennedys. Consistent winds make Newport ideal for sailing, and the city relished its role and its revenue with the America's Cup. Remember those folks I mentioned earlier with their blue blazers and cigars? We're back in harbors of tradition. Investors in the New York Yacht Club poured millions of dollars into keeping the trophy and had their golden boy Dennis Conner at the helm of their boat. With history and fortune on their side, the 1983 challenge looked like every other race since 1851. New York was just going to win. But on the island, over 10,000 miles away, plans were underway to earn the Silver Cup back. A triple threat of brains, experience, and a whole lot of money was coming together to challenge New York. Kangaroos, golden watches, and some wings were on the horizon. Join me next time for part 2 of America's Cup. If you made it this far, I'd love for you to leave a comment below on what you want to see next on this channel. What's your favorite maritime history story that we should tell? This has been another Historsea episode, and I will see you next week.